And these idiots, not Boris, but the rest of these idiots were still telling us to lock down in December last year.
I know, it's like the return of the vampires. We now get, you know, Dr. Grimm and Dr. Reaper coming back on our screens to tell us what we were telling them, or people like you and others.
When they said we were conspiracy theorists, granny killers.
Exactly, and people have been bombarding them with the fact that they have now amazingly discovered that people are going to be dying of other things. I mean, it is unbelievable. And this man, Whitty, he is the chief health officer. He wasn't the chief COVID avoidance officer. He was the chief health officer. His job was overall health of the nation. And the fact that he couldn't see what he was doing by lockdown, I mean, it is absolutely mind-boggling. And as you say, paying £200,000 a year to help plunge this economy into doom and gloom. I mean,
NHS into a worse state than it's ever been before.
Part of the reason why we're in such a mess now, and we've got, you know, spiralling inflation and high taxes, etc. It's a COVID living crisis.
Well, I'd say it's the whole reason. Actually.
Yeah, well, at least Putin has something to do with it.
At least a large part of it.
A large part. So how they have the nerve now to come forward and say, "Oh my goodness, some people are going to die of other things." Well,
and Amy, they are dying in their droves. I remember time and time again during 2020 saying, "This cure is worse than the disease."
I draw issue at that, though, because I don't think that's conclusive at all. I think that's still completely up for debate. And actually, a lot of scientists would suggest that we should have locked down earlier for shorter.
Oh,
and
Amy,
that would have actually
Amy, I'm sorry, I've got to interrupt you again. Do you genuinely think if we'd locked down 2 weeks earlier, we would be in a better place? Look at China. Look at China.
There are a massive consensus of scientists and economists that would agree with me on that, and rather than you. I don't really
I think they're all completely mad. People like Devi Schroeder, who thinks we should have done a zero COVID policy in this country.
The thing is, you must deny vilifying two scientists who were paid to model, not predict the future. And they never said a lockdown would be good. They just said is the least bad of the options. And of course there are going to be side effects, and a lot of them are really, really negative. But that is the cost of COVID rather than lockdown entirely. Lockdown is a side effect of COVID.
Leaked to the media and presented in a disastrous way, leaving the politicians with very little choice. Although, personally, John Sergeant, I think they should have.
The politicians did not take the advice the whole way through, proving my point that we should have locked down earlier had they taken scientific advice.
If you can look at China and still think the answer is earlier lockdown.
China's economy is
short and sharp lockdowns are proven across the board.
You two combined, once you're on a subject like this, just way off into exaggeration about thousands of this, and they don't care, and they're trying to murder people.
Never mentioned thousands.
No, but you're talking about reapers, you know. These two eminent
trying
public
to do their
servants
jobs.
should be trying to kill people. That is what I'm talking.
They have.
All right,
just
now look,
admitted
Christine, can I just?
They have just admitted it.
Can we just have a little bit more sense out of this? That they're pointing out that, in fact, as Amy said, there were no good options. It was always the least bad option. It's much easier to consider these things with hindsight, of course. They knew perfectly well that people were not getting the care that they would normally get because of the lockdown. Everybody knew this. They knew that schools were not providing a proper education. Now, wait a minute. No, come on, Dan. You've had a really good go at this, you two, as if these people are sort of sinister public servants. They're not. They're eminent people who are trying to do their best in an extraordinary moment.
So you don't have any anger towards the scientists?
I don't have anger towards these particular public servants. I do not.
Neil Ferguson?
No, I'm not going to talk about every single scientist who talked about COVID.
No, he was.
I'm not talking about Neil Ferguson. I'm not talking about him. These two public servants had an appallingly difficult job on their hands. And the other thing to bear in mind is sometimes when you look back on all this, like the Second World War, you think, oh, we shouldn't have done that, shouldn't have done that. The Dieppe raid was wrong. All kinds of things were wrong. What you've got to remember is that at a time like that, politicians are being screamed at by the public, do something.
Yeah.
So they then respond, and part of what they're doing is to keep morale up of the public. When you look back on these things with your logic, you simply say, oh, that was unnecessary and that was unnecessary. At the time, we were jolly glad at the time.
But John,
we were glad at the time they had something.
We were calling for it.
You know, the 12-week lockdown.
And that's the most important one.
But sometimes we need leaders who are brave and going to make unpopular decisions like Churchill did during World War II, Christine.
And people were Nobody's saying that they were evil or had evil intent.
You were calling them the Grand Reaper or something.
For goodness sake, that was a throwaway joke.
Well, some joke.
There is a bit of a vilification of these two.
I bet they don't think it's at all funny.
I'm sorry, John. I actually think a lot of the actions of these scientists was completely evil